who has a few sentences for you. Please.
I suradnje i vama, znači vama zajedničke suradnje, a kod mene su vam vrata otvorena za boljitak, naravno, održivi razvoj i očuvanje naše prirode. Hvala vam u srca još jednom.
I'm not a professional translator, but I think that I caught everything most important. Mr. Bull said that he's proud to have this event here. Also, that he's also personally focused politically on green politics and sustainable development. Very happy to be able to cooperate with the BIOM organization. Very proud of their usage of EU funds for preserving nature. Mr. Bull also said that he fully supports them and that his doors of his office are always open to BIOM. Thank you very much, Mr. Bull, once again for being with us here this afternoon. Now, please welcome Ms. Željka Rajković, President of BIOM.
Thank you. I'm not the president, but
Close enough.
Well, I would like to thank all of you on behalf of BIOM for coming here, especially, of course, our guests, but all of you that are interested in Green Deal and nature conservation. As Mr. Bull said, we have an office in Sinj, that's our own office in Croatia, and we are really proud to have in Dalmatian hinterland. And our main project that really, let's say, brought to light this is Dinara Back to Life, in which framework we are also organizing this panel discussion and all the events that Mr. Domagoj announced. So the reason we wanted this event to take place is because we feel that biodiversity conservation really needs to be mainstreamed into other public policies, and we think that actually European Union is really trying to make it happen, and we will try today to actually show how this can be done in Croatia as well. So that's it from me, I think. Thank you again.
Thank you, Željka. And I'm now proud to present you panelists which will discuss today European Green Deal and extra question focused, of course, on Croatia, actually about that, how Croatia can strike it. I will introduce panelists. Please welcome them for the beginning. Mr. Ariel Brunner. He is the coordinator at BirdLife, the leading world organization protecting birds. Please welcome him. coordinates in the BirdLife Europe wide range of EU politics. He will be our first guide into the European New Deal. Also, please welcome Mr. Brendan Dunford. He's coming from Ireland. He is coming from a Burren region, and he's there focused, working for many years on programs for cooperation with farmers to introduce biodiversity and change the agricultural politics. Please welcome. From Turkey, we have our next guest. It is Mr. Engin Yılmaz. He is director of Yolda initiative. Please welcome him. Very interesting approach of Yolda, focusing on cultural heritage, considering nature preservation and introducing politics that can change approach in agriculture also, but also on other fields considering nature preservation. And at the end, Aljoša Duplić from Croatian Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development. He is the director of Institute of Environment and Nature. Please welcome him. For 16 years, Mr. Duplić is mainly focused on he has experience in nature conservation. Let's start with the Green Deal. Mr. Brunner, first we need microphones for all of you. That is for the beginning, just a second. I have to walk a little bit. We have 2 microphones, you will please switch on. Okay, so Mr. Brunner, for the beginning, new Green Deal, essentials, what we hope to change and why.
So the European Green Deal is a quite unprecedented attempt to stand up to the global, frankly, ecological catastrophe that is engulfing humanity. What is new about it is that while national level, European level, in other countries, until now we've always tried either to do environmental policies, so like creating protected areas to try and save, let's say, biodiversity, or we were trying to bring back the environment into some specific policies like agriculture or transport. I think it's pretty much the first attempt to try and bite the whole problem and look at how do we transform our entire economy and society so it can survive in the 21st century. And that translates into those main 3 pillars of climate action, which is essentially about bringing down the greenhouse gas emissions that are completely messing up our climate system, saving biodiversity, so changing fundamentally our relationship with nature, because until now our economy is basically based on pillaging nature, on the assumption that nature will always be there for us. And the third leg of the stool is the move from the linear economy to the circular economy, so from an economy that takes from nature, uses and dumps into nature, to an economy that tries to use and reuse and recycle. So that's in a nutshell.
Biodiversity has new position, let's say like that, or a new perspective with the New Deal.
Absolutely, it's the first time that there is a real recognition that biodiversity matters. I've spent a very long time with my colleagues arguing for biodiversity, and we always had to kind of stand up and say, well, what about biodiversity? And typically the reaction was, biodiversity what? I think we've at least got beyond that stage. A lot of people understand, I think society has started now to understand that without the living world, there can be no human life, there can be no economy. The motto that there are no jobs on the dead planet is really at the heart of it.
Immediately question for Croatia. Mr. Duplić, Croatia looks like it won't be able to reach the goals if something dramatically doesn't change.
Thank you, and it's nice to be here and see near to the newest nature park in Croatia. So, what is the situation in Croatia? First of all, it's well known that Croatia is really very rich, one of the richest states in Europe regarding biodiversity. But what is state of those biodiversity? Is it good or not? The last report for period 2013 to 2018, according to the Habitats Directive, showed us that the situation is not so good. We have around 30% species and habitats that are not in favorable status, conservation status. So we should improve those status for those species and habitats, and on the other hand, we should make as much as possible to leave all species and habitats type that are now in good conservation status in those status. So this is really a big challenge for us. On the other hand, we have a European Green Deal, great document, great plan with all other connected strategies and action plans, which open to us new perspective and put it biodiversity in the center.
You said we should do, but what?
It is. And now we are working, it is on EU level, and we are working now on mainstreaming in each of states in EU. Because, you know, you have on one level European Commission, and then you have states, and each state...
Considering Croatia, in which sector do you think it would be most difficult? Is agriculture? Somebody's laughing here. Maybe I should ask you where it would be easy.
You know, there is many challenges, because you cannot conserve and improve nature without work in other sectors. So it is exercise for all of us, whole community. On one hand, we should make transition to climate neutral, to ecologically sustainable society, which we are not society here in Croatia, but in total, in globally, and in EU especially. And on the other hand, we should work through different policies of different sectors. And now we are in position, which is stronger than ever, to put biodiversity, focus on biodiversity in other policies, agriculture, energy, and so on. And we are on good way, but there is still many different opinions, and we should work together, have dialogue with European Commission.
Do you think that the most important players in different sectors in Croatia are ready for dialogue with civil society organizations and experts when we talk about?
They open, slowly, but they open, and they will be ready, believe me.
Okay. The one example from Ireland, just please take a microphone. Mr. Dunford, a few sentences about the Burren program. It is an example how it can be done.
Yeah, again, thanks for the invitation to my colleagues in Biome, and it's a pleasure to be in Croatia. It's a beautiful country, and it's a beautiful town here in Sin, and I'm delighted to be here. Yeah, Ireland is a lot different in the sense that not everything is wonderful. We have huge challenges. I think almost 70% of our habitats are in unfavourable conservation status. There's a lot of conflict between the agricultural sector, the transport sector, and some of the green initiatives, including New Green Deal and Farm to Fork. We have challenges at the local level between different sectors in agriculture. So it's a very challenging environment, and I certainly don't have all the solutions, and we'll have all to work hard on together to get the solutions. But sometimes I'm daunted by the problems, so I'm fortunate that I work at ground level with farmers and conservationists and farm advisors and government officials on a real-time project, which has had some success over the years and is growing its footprint nationally. I suppose, explain it briefly, we all recognise that the wrong type of farming can be very destructive to our environment, but I think the corollary is that the right type of farming can have very positive effects on our environment, particularly these areas of high nature value in Europe. If we can manage those well, we can do a lot to address these big environmental challenges. So I think I view farmers as a resource rather than a problem. And it's a different way of thinking, and my challenge for the last 20 years has been how do we mobilise this wonderful resource at ground level in our rural communities across Europe. And I've boiled it down to three very simple things. One, the pocket. It has to make financial sense to deliver for nature as well as deliver good food. So we pay farmers for their success in delivering biodiversity, water quality, cultural heritage, benefits to society. We quantify and reward. Secondly, the head. How do you farm for nature, for climate? It's very complicated. It's incredibly complicated, the decisions that you have to make. So we try to give our farmers the best advice and guidance and support to allow them to do the right thing for nature in order that they might be then rewarded for doing it. And the third piece, which I think is hugely challenging right across not just the farming sector but elsewhere, is this heart piece. It's getting people to really care and want to do the right thing. And I think this is something you can throw money at a problem, but unless people are bought into the solution, you will always struggle. So we spent a lot of time empowering farmers to become leaders in conservation. We have a beautiful network of ambassadors which show us best practice. The solutions are out there. How do you farm regeneratively for the environment and produce good food? The solutions are out there. The market isn't always there for those outcomes, and the support isn't always there, but the solutions are there, and we sort of see farmers as having a role in sharing those solutions, so peer-to-peer learning. So I think if we address the pocket, the head and the heart, we have a huge resource at our disposal right across Europe to address some of these really huge problems that we face. So we've done that in a small region in Ireland called the Burren. For the last 12 years we paid farmers for their environmental outcomes. And the model has been so successful that it's now been adopted by the Irish government as the main model for agri-environment in Ireland. So soon we'll have 150 million euros per year and 20,000 farmers being paid not just for their food but for their environmental outcomes. So I think there is solutions which can start small and grow organically and have a big impact.
If we have enough time. We're going to Turkey and to Yolda initiative, Mr. Yılmaz, you're focused on using good traditions, not only good practices, but good tradition, but preserving biodiversity.
Yes, by the way, I'm here representing also the Alliance for Mediterranean Nature and Culture. It's an alliance of 13 organizations in the Mediterranean. And our collective understanding is that the human history is basically the cultivation of nature, hence the Latin root of the word culture is cultum, which is cultivated lands and lands. And there are still many cultural practices such as mobile pastoralism, transhumance, all different of agricultural knowledge as well, that are still benefiting biodiversity in the region, but these nature-friendly systems have been facing lots of threats and challenges in the last 2 centuries particularly, and they are being avoided by the policy frameworks and also the enforcement of these policies. And these challenges and threats are beyond their capability to develop responses for sustaining their livelihood in a sustainable manner. But there are still, like the example which just Brendan gave, in terms of biodiversity conservation, we have to look at the agriculture sector definitely in Europe and beyond. But we don't always need to be innovative, we can be retro-innovative, because there is already some knowledge there which we can utilize in terms of governance, in terms of the strategies, tactics, tools to cultivate the lands.
Maybe an example, something what you think it is good functioning, not just a good idea, but good functioning still in practice.
Sure. Let's start with mobile pastoralism. It's a very good example in the Mediterranean basin, including European countries. Let's say transhumans in Spain, for instance, they are playing a very important role in nutrient cycle, meaning good for providing safe food for the vultures, as for all European Union countries are trying to preserve. Or they are very important for seed dispersal. The 1,000 sheep can carry during the transhumance almost 200 million seeds. If we lose them, we are going to lose that function as well, so we are not going to be able to have a really functioning, connected areas of high biodiversity system.
Going back to Mr. Brunner, Mr. Duplić said that the position of experts for protection of nature was never strong like it is today. But is there danger? I think we discussed a little bit about that during the lunch. Is there a danger that everything finished just on the marketing or on the PR or presenting image to the public without serious change of approach to nature in Europe?
Absolutely. I've really noticed that in the last few years we've really moved to a new era, and we've moved essentially in Europe from the era of denial to the era of greenwashing. So until now, you know, we were asking for change and people were telling you, what are you talking about, the system is wonderful. Now that it's obvious to pretty much everyone that the system is collapsing, the answer is, you are right, we need change. I've already changed, look, it's all fine. And then they keep doing the same things. And I think we are seeing it all around. So whether it's in the new CAP, where we've analyzed member states' draft plans, and we have found a few good examples, like the ones that have been just been mentioned about the result-based, the new result-based scheme in Ireland. But we have also found, in Ireland and elsewhere, a lot of fake schemes, whether it's eco schemes or agri-environment, which are de facto paying the same people to do the same things, but under a green label. We are seeing it where the European Union has come up with this financial taxonomy system to try and allow investors to be sure that if you put your money into a green investment, it's really green. And then, under heavy lobby, they've declared green all of logging and burning of forests, and now nuclear and gas, and you name it. So there is constantly this fight, both to get the change happening on paper, but then to make sure that the change on paper translates into change in reality, because ultimately the atmosphere or the living world don't care at all about the fact that we change the labels, right? They care about whether we are actually changing the ecology.
All players have to be ready to join the change. From a Burren experience, what was or what is the key approach to the farmers to persuade them to join us?
I suppose there's no one simple answer. There's many things. One is, I think we began by re-establishing our relationship with these farmers, because for too long we were telling them what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And this is very disempowering for a farmer whose identity is all around freedom and being able to make a choice, him or herself. So I think building a relationship with the farmer and assuring the farmer that he has a role, an important role in this whole big debate and this big challenge that we all face. Secondly, it was building a system which, I suppose, met farmers' value systems. So a lot of farmers are sick of paperwork and bureaucracy that sometimes comes with designations, and sometimes comes with the common agricultural policy, and sometimes comes with these schemes and permissions. So we took away those. And it
often grows as it goes to.
It always grows. It always grows. So taking those things away so that the farmer could go out there and farm. And thirdly, making a business case for biodiversity. I think it's too easy for me to be critical of a farmer's behaviour if it makes perfect economic sense, at least in the short term, to do what he does. Until I go back out to that farmer and say, look, here's a better financial proposition. You can produce maybe a little bit less food and more biodiversity, and we can reward you for that. Not compensate you, but reward you. And then there's the whole relationships between farmers themselves. I think if you can break through the culture of farming, which is often to conquer nature and to beat it into submission to produce more food, but if you can show, and farmers can show each other, that actually there's a way of working with nature that can help you reduce your costs, sustain your outputs, and have a better quality of life. So there's all these little factors, little actors, but I think the key ingredients isn't just money, it's time, it's building those relationships. And to your question before, do we have enough time? This is my big worry, but I guess you have to start somewhere. But I think working with that particular community of farmers, it's about re-establishing relationships, making them feel like they have a role, supporting them in that role, and rewarding them when they fulfill that role.
Mr. Yılmaz, on the other side, if you have local community who is ready, for example, to continue with their traditional practices which are good for the nature, then you have next challenge, and that is that other players have to listen to them, to ready to help them, to support them, talking about administration on the local level, on the state level. Your experience from Turkey, but also from other Mediterranean countries, do you think that administration is ready and open to help protecting nature by cooperation with producers, with agriculture sector?
There's definitely a shift, as Ariel mentioned. The Green Deal itself is a very good example. There are also international examples, like processes that are supporting this this shift, like the International Year for Renaissance and Pastures, very recently endorsed by the United Nations General Assembly, calling the states to work with these traditional cultural practitioners. And there is another mechanism, for instance, other affected area conservation, effective conservation measures, which is a CBD, conventional biological diversity mechanism, and it's also supporting. All these are showing the shift towards these states that you are mentioning, but currently there are also many problems in terms of the sincerity of the policymakers towards this target, and also yes, there is a shift, there is a progress, but there is still a lot of things to do for these communities to self-sustain in a friendly manner with nature conservation, and there are lots of things to do. And one of the most important things for us is to start with differentiating between these practices and the other intensive versions which are actually harming the nature. There is, for instance, for pastoralism, which is in its essence totally different from intensive industrial agriculture sector. It's not differentiated by any state, by any international statistics, policy frameworks. If you cannot differentiate them, how can you develop your support schemes, applying in a successful way to support those good ones?
And it's always a question, do we stay on paper or are we really ready to adapt to change something in practice? Please hand in the air if you have at any moment any question. Please join us in discussion. Do not hesitate and do not wait till the end. It's not good strategy. Yes, yes.
Jump in.
No?
Yes, yes, yes. Just to jump in on that, at the heart of a lot of those problems, there is an issue of vested interests. I mean, the main reason why we are stuck in the current dynamics, particularly around agriculture, is, if we want to be honest about it, because there are very few people that make a lot of money out of the current disaster. And those people usually tend to control the governments, the ministries, and so on. I think everybody knows by now that if you look at the CAP subsidies, 20% of the beneficiaries take 80% of the money. More importantly, a third of the money goes to 1.5% of the people. And very often, those big beneficiaries are tightly linked with the dominant farm unions that run the show, with the big highly concentrated companies that sell the inputs, the few concentrated companies that buy the outputs. So the change that we need would be beneficial to society, would be beneficial to the majority of farmers, but few people are afraid that they would lose a lot of money out of it, and those people are powerful, and those people fight to keep the system. So there is a very fundamental political problem behind it. Then, of course, reality is complicated, and there is a role for technological innovation, for economic innovation, for ecological innovation, for engaging people on the ground, for all sorts of things. But as long as the rules are rigged to serve someone, well, the outcome will remain the same.
Mr. Duplić, in Croatia, maybe we don't have such problem like influential farming lobbies, but we have different problems generally with practice of something what is theoretically acceptable on the paper. We had even a lot of cases of corruption, considering using EU funds for sustainable development projects, for renewable energy projects, and so on. Does Croatia change something on that topics?
So we are working a lot on implementation of all green policies in Croatia. It's our basic work. So
are you satisfied on the field, not on paper?
That I'm satisfied with all. I would work then as, I don't know, ski instructor or not as nature conservationist.
Okay.
You know. So I'm looking on my work and on work of other people which are working in sector as something which is question of, let's say, I don't want to be pathetic or dramatic, but question of life. It's really question of life. You know, that is position of nature conservation, that we are now working on improving quality of life and securing prosperity, future prosperity of our species. And from those positions we are working each day, coming to work and go back home. Do we have problems, as you said, as society? We have. I think we have in whole EU. From state to the state, it's different. We have different issues, set challenges, and so on. For example, in Croatia, regarding agriculture, there was a lot talk about agriculture. There is now one mantra, and it's true. It's true. We should be self-sufficient in food production. How we will come to that point, it's question. There is many different ways. In my opinion, the right way is going hand by hand with green policies. So now is moment in which we can really make this transformation.
But are you afraid, exactly talking about this, are you afraid of different companies, lobbies, whatever, using this moment when we talk about self-sustainable food production, also say self-sustainable energy and so on, that we will try to avoid green policies, trying to going back to all principles, all schemes?
You know, there will be always many different lobbies, and there will be always greenwashing. Greenwashing is present from Coca-Cola to, I don't know, you know, there is many companies that are making, okay, let's make some carbon offset actions, let's plant some trees on some hectares of land, but we will have business as usual. You know, we should change this business as usual, and from energy sector. For example, in Croatia now we open and the focus will be on civic energy. So put on your home solar panels, you will be supported to make that. State will give you some financing for that. So that's the way to be energy independent and sufficient.
Mr. Brunner, are you afraid of this moment with the war in Ukraine, with post-COVID crisis? Are you afraid that the new Green Deal could be again avoided and left on shelf?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a huge concerted push to kill the Green Deal at the moment. led by a bunch of dirty industries. The intensive farm lobby is one of them, the fossil fuel industry is another of them, which are manipulating very cynically the horrible invasion of Ukraine. In the case of agriculture, basically they are trying to sell this food security narrative of saying, look, Ukraine will not be exporting wheat anymore, so there is risk of starvation, we need to produce more, and that means that we need free hand with pesticides, and irrigation, and fertilizers, and all the good stuff. This is cynical and wrong, and we need to be able to resist it, because while at the moment we do not have a food security crisis, neither in Europe and not even globally, we have way more food than we need. The problem is of distribution and of who gets the food and who can afford the food. We are going toward a world where we do risk not being able to produce because of climate change and ecosystem collapse. So if we stop dealing with the ecological collapse in order to produce more, all we are doing is creating even more waste now and then starving later, and later is not in a century from now, it's coming very fast. So that would be suicidal. At the same time, we have ways to deal even with the Ukraine shock that are just sitting in front of us. The quickest one is to stop burning food. In the EU, we spend a lot of money on subsidies on biofuels, on paying people to burn good food that could go into the food system. To give you a taste of it, between the EU and the US, just in terms of wheat, we are burning about the equivalent of the entire Ukrainian harvest. We have 7% of the arable land in Europe that is used for biofuels. So we could create a lot of food tomorrow morning by a decision of European governments, and a few of them, the Czech, the Belgians are at least starting to discuss about stopping this madness. But I think that takes us to another very important thing. If people are talking about, ensuring stable, safe food for the future, which is very important, then you need to look on the production side on how you make it ecologically compatible, because if you run out of water, you won't produce anything in the future. But also on the consumption side, because 60% of our arable land goes to feed animals, and we know that eating animals that have eaten plants is a lot less efficient than eating the plants directly. So we can, if we act both on the demand side and on the production side, we can have a future that is stable and safe.
Going on to the next topic, it will be restoration law. We will go through all countries and through all examples, but we have a question first. We have also a microphone for you. And I will ask you just to turn the microphone in the other direction, just up to that direction, just to not interfere with that microphone. That's all. No, just turn it around.
Okay. So my name is Ariel Brunner. I work for a local NGO here in Croatia. For over 30 years, we work with farmers I'm loud enough.
Yes, it's okay now. No. We want to have you on tape,
So we work on the field, so I know what Brendan has been talking about, and that the only way is to, give respect first to the people that you work with, and then build everything else. But I wanted to ask for Mr. Duplić, who is presenting the whole Croatian state here. I don't think you are the person to address this. I think somebody from the Ministry of Agriculture should be answering this. But you said, and you both said, there is biodiversity is now here in the strategic documents, and we have to take this chance. We also know that the Commission has commented the first draft of our CAP, and on several places they said, especially work on getting the goals on biodiversity. So this is, can you tell me the ways that nature protection sector can really influence these policies, because my colleague from BIOM and I, we are in the support of overseeing the rural development, whatever. From 50 people there, we are the only ones of so-called green something. There is one person of organic agriculture. All others are very intensive, traditional, agricultural, industry, economists, I don't know, agricultural mechanization organizations and that kind of stuff. So I see very small space of really influencing and putting some of the biodiversity goals in our cap. Can you comment a little bit on that?
Or more precise, can you promise that something can be changed and that the biodiversity will not be just like, just to show?
Yeah, I am not in position to talk in front of agriculture, of course, it's the other sector. But your question is, let's say, example for something what about talk before. This dialogue between other sectors and mainstreaming of biodiversity, in this case to agriculture. It is really a challenge for us, not just for us as a sector of nature, but for us as society to recognize importance to take into account nature, to make agriculture more nature friendly, to decrease use of pesticides, for example, for 50% until 2030. Is this important just for nature or for us and for all people in Croatia and their health? So there is many arguments. We are in contact with colleagues from agriculture, exchanging knowledge, exchanging arguments.
Do they accept your arguments? Colleagues, for the beginning, colleagues at the Agriculture Ministry?
They accept them. But now is question how you will make changes, quick or slowly, and important is also to get comments from European Commission. That will help, of course, and put us in let's say stronger position in this dialogue. But the same is in other states, and there was in 2020 already in January a statement made by ENCA, European Network of Directors of Agencies for Nature Conservation, through European Commission about new cap, how it should recognize nature and put in focus.
Just one short.
Yes.
The irony is that the money is here even more than we can actually pool. Because I mean, from the all in the last programming period, from all the goals, the only goal that we couldn't reach was the biodiversity and environment protection. So that there was a basket of money, the 30% of money that we could pool if we could reach enough, if we could put enough people in environment measures, and we couldn't make it because of many reasons. This is a different topic. But the irony is when my colleagues from other countries ask me, like, oh, do you have good measures? We have good measures. We have the money, but the implementation, even on the existing, it's really very important. So this is
the question for whom?
This is the Ministry of Agriculture, administration, agents, paying agencies, the whole support system, advisors, the whole support system that should support the farm. Because the farmer, especially when Mr. Yılmaz says in marginal lands, who will deal with the administration? Even if you find a way between you and you who can, in Brussels, say something in their behalf, who will do that in the field? Even if you find the money. This link is broken in Croatia. There is, there is just not enough human and professional capacities in the supporting agencies. Excuse me if anybody is here from, but it's a systematic problem.
Okay, if this link is broken in Croatia, how can this link be fixed? Whose responsibility is that?
So I guess Brendan is probably the expert because he has actually fixed it in his neck of the wood. But I would just say that this is really important because this is the situation everywhere. And the reason for that is ultimately the lack of political will and the control of the political machinery by the vested interest, which then leads to the situation where, if you put money for buying new tractors, there are companies that sell tractors. So those companies will send someone to knock on people's door and with the tractor or shoes and push it, right? You don't need any extension service, anything, and if there is bureaucracy involved, they will fill the paper for you, right? Nature doesn't have that machine. Nobody goes around selling biodiversity or carbon sinks. People are selling carbon sinks, but it's a different story. Shut it down immediately. So that's where we need to be able to get the state to do its job. Now, then, how you do that? We have one of the best experts.
I'm really glad you raised it as a point because we often forget we can have all the best policies and best science, but actually, at the end of the day, it's the guy on the ground who's going to deliver or not.
And papers.
Yeah, you can have all this. So I think it's a really important area, and I can't answer all the questions immediately, but I think we've done it so badly up to now. I think we've used the wrong language. I think we've used wrong messengers. I think we've been very top-down in imposing ideas. I think it's one of engagement and creating an incentive. And I really do think this notion of paying farmers for environmental outcomes is a game changer, because the farmer has an incentive. He will get rewarded the more he delivers. So it's not the case of the guy next door gets the same amount of money for doing nothing and I'm doing everything. So there's that. It also creates an appetite for information. So the farmer wants to know, he wants to find out the best research, the best products, the best services he can use. He has a stake in delivering for nature. And I think that's a really big thing as well. Having it at a local level is critical. Having those local levels and a continuity of relationships. Again, if you think like the farmer, so somebody wants me to do something, is that person going to be around in 2 or 3 years? Is that funding going to be there before I change my system? Is having local resources available there to support you to deliver these outcomes in the long term, and the guarantee of there being a reward there as well. And using different language, acknowledging that too much science isn't going to get you anywhere other than confused. Just get on with it, start doing things and learn as you go. I think there's all these things, and peer exchange is huge as well. So I think there's ways of doing it. They're not simple, they're quite complex, but they really can be done, and I'm really glad that you highlighted this as a big gap in what we need to do.
But again, also political willingness to design this approach. We have to go further. Restoration law, Mr. Duplić, what are Croatian plans on that issue?
We are waiting on it, and we are very happy to have it. So regarding restoration, as I said, in Croatia we have two main, let's say, approaches. One is to make effective management and use for that management plans which are now in preparations, more than 200 of them. And on the other hand, there is a lot to do in improvement of status of different type of habitats or species. It includes restoration, of course. Main focus for us is restoration of flooding forests of poplar now drying in more than 10,000 hectares in continental part of Croatia, in Sava Basin, so to restore those habitat type. And on the other hand, main focus will be on river connectivity improvement, but there will be much more different types of restorations and opportunity for those restorations through implementations of these measures from management plans.
Partners?
Partners. So list is open from institutions, state institutions, private sector, civil society, NGOs, so all which are willing to involve, and of course in some cases those which are responsible managers. For example, on waters, nothing without Croatian Waters, because Croatian Water Company is responsible for management on waters. In forests, state forests, in cooperation with Croatian forests. But
civil society will be accepted as an equal partner with their knowledge.
Of course. And this Dinara Back to Life project is a great example that civil society could be leader in restoration of some ecosystem or some habitats.
Turkish experiences and plans on restoration.
Well, unfortunately, we don't also have an overall umbrella policy framework on ecosystem restoration. And in general, restoration in Turkey is a very production-driven approach. I think it's not just the case with Turkey, with many countries, in the EU as well, and in the Mediterranean. What I mean is, for instance, the forestry ministries are rather taking the issue as a timber production, logging the trees, or same goes with the agriculture and grasslands, how we can increase the forage for increasing the number of the livestock. So the programs that are being applied in Turkey and in many other countries that I know in firsthand are actually not really caring about biodiversity conservation, nature conservation, or the ecosystem services, but rather about how to increase the production.
Ireland experience and challenges there. You said at the beginning that the figures are not good.
No, they're not good at all. But I still say, I mean, the initial priority for us is to stop the ongoing damage to habitats. You talk about that there's still some perverse policies and things happening which are causing habitat loss, unfortunately. And secondly, then the management of the high nature value habitats that we have, and then it comes to restoration. So in Ireland, restoration is usually used around peat bogs. In Ireland, we're very fortunate to have lots of peatlands and bogs, which are huge carbon sinks. But we've been burning them, cutting them and burning them for generations. So the effort now is to shift away from that and to use them as a resource. So it's a case of blocking drains and allowing these bogs to re-wet. But it's been phenomenally difficult because it's mixed up with cultural tradition. We always went to the bog and harvested our own turf, and now we can't do it anymore. And what's this all about? Even though it's a small fuel source anymore, it's been a huge struggle. So I think if you talk about ecological restoration in Ireland, it's very, very, very early stage.
Can I add something? I remember this because of the Dinara project. In Turkey, between 1940 to 2000, we lost 70% of the grasslands, mainly due to agricultural expansion and intensification. 70, that's huge. And after 2000, one of the leading reasons why we were losing the grasslands were afforestation, restoration projects, forestry restoration projects, unfortunately. And billions of trees were planted in the name of ecosystem restoration. And considering that lands are already being abandoned by the traditional pastoralists, And then there is this one purpose, adverse restoration policies. It's still, harming the nature in all possible ways. Yeah.
European restoration law can change something?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. So first of all, one of the things that I think is important, and I hope this law will do it, is putting some order in the terminology and so on, because planting, tree plantations is not restoration in any form or shape. It's mostly ecological vandalism. And there's a bit of it still going on in this part of the world, and we need to rapidly rethink it, not just for biodiversity, because if you take a karstic grassland that is full of orchids and endemic plants and insects, and you carpet it with Aleppo pines, they are all gone. But you are also creating a fireball, and you know what will happen. It will take 1, 2, 3 decades, it will all burn, and it will kill people. And the climate scenarios are telling us that fires will just increase. So we are doing some phenomenally stupid things at the moment, sometimes even with good intention. Now, the restoration law, I think, can be a game changer. We are working very hard on it. I mean, we have to have a moment of kind of BirdLife pride, because it's in our idea, but a lot of what is in the upcoming Commission proposal actually comes from us and from other people in the environmental movement that we've been working with. I think it can do some very important things. So one is bring a mental shift, if we want, from the kind of defensive type of conservation to, if we want, an offensive type of conservation. We spent decades trying to save the last good corners of nature while destroying all the rest. We got to a point where we need to actually start giving relevancy back to nature, and we need to fix what we have already broken. The second thing that I hope it can do is make the Natura 2000 network a network, which is what it was supposed to be to start with. At the moment, it's a cluster of sites, sometimes well managed, sometimes not so well managed. It allows us to make them the backbone of a real conservation system. And then the other thing, and it links to what you said about agriculture result-based, it has fundamentally a philosophy that is based on achieving results, on reversing the trends of populations of birds or butterflies, on bringing habitats to favorable status within specific time deadlines, and that can really help us build that accountability and cut through the greenwashing, so that we start holding people accountable for what they are actually achieving. So I have big expectations for it. Of course, we need to see how good is what will come out of the Commission and how good it will be after the
You mentioned mistakes. Engin also told us about, changing the habitats, replacing it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but especially in Eastern Europe, there is the start of the problem in defining some habitat or some space as empty, not recognizing
that's a
anything but emptiness that can be fulfilled with many creative ideas.
That's a huge issue. So just like a lot of people still equate forests with trees, and then a tree plantation is a forest, although it's de facto a monoculture. And hence, a lot of politicians are equating tree planting with helping nature, even when you're planting the wrong trees or planting them in the wrong places. You also get habitats that are still being neglected because people just don't see them. Now, one obvious one are dry grasslands. Limestone pavement grasslands, which are dear to your heart and my heart. I come from a country where the best biodiversity we have is in things that for 10 months a year look like bare rocks. And people have built a whole ideology, Israel has built its whole kind of rhetoric for a century about making the desert bloom. That desert blooms naturally for about a month a year, and it is the most beautiful wildflowers you can imagine.
Without intervention.
It's just that they flower after the rain, and then they disappear, and then it's kind of dry and barren. But it is a very, very important. Now, that sort of habitat still, in a lot of, in the eyes of too many people, is empty space that should be used for building something on it, you know. And if you really can't build anything on it, then you throw trash on it, right? That's as a Mediterranean, that's kind of our shared heritage. Now, we need to get to a point where people actually see the beauty in the limestone payments, see the beauty in all the beautiful birds and butterflies and orchids and so on that live there, and also understand the ecological function that it has in terms of, for example, making sure that the water goes into the caves that then eventually ends up in the tap in your home. So yes, again, this is another job that I think Natura 2000 has been starting to do a great job on it, and I think the restoration law can build on it, is bringing up the profile of those habitats that are not naturally kind of famous and appealing and everybody knows about.
Going to the next part of open questions, open issues. Renewable energy, Mr. Duplić, our creation experience with renewable energy projects on one side and biodiversity, preserving nature, restoration on the other side. Can it go together in Croatia?
They should go together, but you know, renewable energy is a great challenge for us. On one hand, and it is some kind of oxymoron in European Green Deal. On one hand, okay, we are going to carbon neutral society. On the other hand, we should improve status of biodiversity. What happens? Renewable energy needs space for installation of...
And seeking empty spaces.
And then investors are looking, oh great, we have now European Green Deal. According to that, everything is open to us. We are now main. No, you are not in position to go wherever you want. So you have procedures on one hand. On the other hand, for example, what we are now doing in Croatia, we started with a project of preparing maps to identify locations which are not in conflict with birds and bats for wind farms and for solar farms. However, these solar farms, what does it mean? To use arable land, to use grasslands, to cover them with solars in hectares and hectares, hundreds of hectares, to get energy, or to invest in brownfield, so to use existing roofs, existing parking places, and so on. So we should be really smart. We should be smart in way what to financially support. Also, we have environmental procedures and appropriate assessment procedure for ecological network, and these tools we should use. Also, we should be smart in process of special planning, because this is first step to identify locations which are the best from perspective of biodiversity to be used for renewables on one hand, and on the other hand to have their good wind potential or solar potential or so on. And we should have a combination of many different sources. For example, 5 years ago there was no solars in Croatia. Now there is inflation of solar, so everyone wants to build and invest in solars. have a smart combination of different type of sources, and also I already mentioned this civic energy, which is really important, and there is also great potential on our roofs, especially in this southern part of Croatia.
Are you afraid, or do we already have in Croatia a situation that renewable energy is new El Dorado for investors who are actually there for all other reasons except for transparent, sustainable business?
So we have system. We have system, and if you are going through those systems, you cannot go left or right. It's clear what procedure you should pass. If you are doing something outside procedure, then it's illegal or...
Just for our foreign visitors, we have a bunch of ex-ministers in jail because of windmills. That's why I'm asking that. Are we in danger that the renewable energy becomes something what, I don't know, recycling was 20 years ago, and not what it should be?
So there's a bunch of dangers. I mean, obviously we need to do the energy transition super fast. We've wasted decades and we do not have further decades. So we need to go carbon free very, very fast, and that means a lot of wind, a lot of solar, with the electrification that comes with it and the storage and so on. Now, there are terrible risks of getting it wrong, and we are already getting it wrong. So obviously one is the risk of corruption. If you deregulate and you don't follow the procedures, then you will attract criminals and cowboys, and it will be a disaster. That's one risk. The other risk is of sacrificing nature and the ecosystems, because if you just give subsidies to build stuff, even good stuff like solar panels, then people will just go to where the land is cheap and plentiful, which are the karstic grasslands, because that's where there is nothing, and then you end up doing the wrong things in the wrong places. And we are already doing a lot of damage, because at the moment 60% of our so-called renewable energy is actually biomass, and we are chopping down all the forests and burning them, which is madness from the climate point of view. It's actually worse for the climate than the fossil fuel it replaces, and all sorts of problems that come with it. So we need good planning. I think you're totally right. It's all about good strategic planning, so that you choose the right renewables. There's a bit of bioenergy you can do from waste and so on, but broadly speaking, we need to get out of burning stuff. We need to avoid killing our very last free-flowing river for hydro, but there is a lot of work to be done on retrofitting the existing dams that we have, so that they have modern turbines and so on. And then we need to build a lot of wind and solar, and there it's about the sensitivity analysis, exactly what has been done, and we are doing a lot of work on it. We need a map of where are the birds and the bats and the habitats, and where's the potential for wind and so on, and where are the interconnections. And then you do smarter things also in terms of, not putting the renewable energy here and the transmission lines there, and they don't connect to each other. If we do smart planning, the potential is huge. In Germany there's an estimate that you need about 2% of the country for renewable energy, and Germany is a very hungry country in terms of energy. It's not impossible to find 2% of land that you can allocate. It's difficult, but it's not impossible.
And it shouldn't be, just by one cut, but it should be smart.
And we should involve local communities. We should not go back to kind of, Stalinistic or Franco-era things where someone says it will be built here, and then the villagers just do it. You need to involve people and to get them enthusiastic about it and build it with them. And then there are all sorts of smart things that you can do. I mean, solar roofs are the most obvious one, but we have a lot of land that we have already degraded. ex-industrial facilities and so on. We can also put wind farms. We can, floating solar on concrete canals where you will reduce the water losses, things like that. Agrovoltaic, solar in agricultural land doesn't need to mean paving over productive landscape. It might mean shading the crops, which in the Mediterranean might mean that you are actually increasing the productivity. It's about doing the right thing in the right place, thinking from the beginning about nature and biodiversity and the implications of what you do. If you think about it from the beginning, you will do the right choices.
Brendan and Engin, question for your experience with renewable energy coexisting with preserving nature.
Yeah, I think it just emphasises this notion of co-benefits, that we shouldn't look just at one benefit, we need to look at the broader suite of benefits. I think Ariel made a number of really interesting points about how that can be done. I keep thinking at farm level, even there's so many buildings that could be, could host solar panels, there's so many opportunities there. I think it's a little bit like forestry as well. I love the idea of agroforestry, integrating trees with pastures and with nature, and also energy generation in the same way. There's one lovely expression that I read somewhere, keep the countryside complex. We've been trying to simplify our countryside with blocks of trees and blocks of pasture land and blocks of crops and bunches of turbines. That's not the way forward. We've been simplifying our countryside, we need to make it complex, and we need to have farmers who are producing biodiversity, great food, energy, who are storing carbon, who are producing clean water, all of these things, that's the vision. So I think it can happen at a micro level, but the challenges at the macro level are huge, and we have to get it right, and we have to involve people in the planning of that.
I would like to emphasize the point that Ariel said, which is about good planning, because our experience, collective experience, also it's still going on right now in the Balkans with Vjosa river type hydropower plantations. We all gone through that and we lost lots of biodiversity. So good planning, picking the criteria very carefully and trying to be really establishing the balance between pros and cons is really, really important. And one other thing that we find important is the energy consumption policies. That should be also a very important issue for state level and regional level policies as well, that we need to transform the way that we understand the consumption of energy as well.
Last question, I will start from Aljoša, and it is considering also these renewable energy issues. Is this formula, keep it complicated, keep it small, the best way to avoid corruption, to avoid problematic investors who are not interested in biodiversity, specific situation, different location, and of course it means a lot more management from the state or from agencies who will deal with that, but is this the on long-term safest solution?
I think we should have clear state of game and keep it simple or keep it complicated. Keep it simple as much as possible, but simple with predefined rules and with predefined locations. So this special planning, I'm going back to it, it is really important step. First step, to identify locations for something bigger and in space, and to make assessment on those levels, then to give a relatively secure position to investor, and of course you have then assessment of project. It is only way, and we should combine. We should combine solars on roof, geothermal in-house, in some public building, and with some bigger investments. There is question, do we have still free hydro potential for some larger hydropower plants? I'm not sure. Also is question what will happen with hydro potential in future, because decrease of precipitation. It is really climate depending source of energy. Wind will be here, solar will be here, combination with geothermal. Do we have also combination with some biomass, but not use of forests for biomass to use? I don't know, some materials from agriculture, from production as biomass source. But yeah, we should work on different aspects and to make on some bigger production and also production in-house, and to be as much as possible energy independent and effective.
And as a journalist, I have to say again, and to avoid investors who are ready to ask how much I have to pay for 1 ingot. You know what I'm talking about.
I don't know for those investors. Really.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't work with investors, and I don't know what does it mean.
We had.
I'm not economist. I'm biologist. For me,
we had in one police investigation that experience. That sentence was said.
But this is not legal. So to come and to pay for what, for pairing. So it is not legal. It is not possible. If somebody is doing that, so it is illegal.
I'm really convinced that there is a very strong link between doing things right and doing things clean, and it cuts in both directions. So, I mean, it's very obvious that if you have corruption, it becomes impossible to do what's good for society. But I think that it also flows the other way around. If you create a system where you do things on proper scientific basis and with good public involvement and transparency, corruption becomes a lot more difficult. Because if you do, for example, the mapping of where are the birds and where is the wind potential, and then you derive from it where are the areas with minimum conflict, and you put it out in the public domain, the chances that those areas happen to be the property of the cousin of the prime minister or the best friend of the minister are vanishingly small. They need to be really, really lucky. If the decisions are being taken behind closed doors based on who knows what, humans being humans, the results tend to be in favor of whoever takes the decision. So I think that the environmental agenda is actually very, very good for the democracy and the rule of law agenda.
Brandon, message for the end of this discussion to Croatia, considering Green Deal and challenges and aims.
Yeah, I think I'd go back to the very beginning to the fact that you have so much in Croatia. I mean, you still have such a good starting point, you still have such good natural assets in this country, and that's wonderful and should be celebrated. Secondly, I think the NGO sector, as exemplified by BIOM and other actors as well, are a real resource. And I know from working with Birdwatch and our own NGO in Ireland as well, that sector can offer an awful lot. They're often seen as being the enemy, but I think in the future they're going to be more and more integrated because they're going to be needed to bring forward the results that we need. So I think there's obviously massive challenges, but you have a strong start. I think that these policies, whether it's new CAP strategic plans or the Green Deal, are only as good as the implementation on the ground. And I think that for me is going to be the biggest challenge of all, and having good systems in place as well. So, look, I don't have any of the answers. I've got a good story from Ireland, and I wish you well here in Croatia, and I think
it's fine, definitely. Engin?
Well, I think the Green Deal is also providing an opportunity to change to transform the relations between the stakeholders, as Brendan said at his first speech. So instead of just becoming stakeholders in the same process, we can actually be forming alliance between different people, like the farmers and also the scientists. And if the processes are designed in a very transparent and participatory manner, then there are going to be much less gaps towards such bad examples in terms of wrong steps. And one other thing I think in this process regarding Green Deal, regarding restoration and sector, I think the setting the accountability measures for each actor is very, very crucial, so that everybody knows that they are going to pay if they do something bad for the benefit of nature, but the local people as well, and for the welfare of the communities.
And Aljoša, for the end really now, what do you think will be the first goal, first result we will see in Croatia from Green Deal change? What do you hope will be the first result?
We can see some changes, but for example, one, I think, really important pledge made by Prime Minister Plenković last year in Glasgow on COP26 was increase surface of protected areas on sea on 30%. Now is a bit more than 12%. So I think this is really great step for Croatia. Really important decision. Now it's on us to work on it and to make our Adriatic better, to improve status of marine ecosystem in Croatia, and to secure fish for fishermen and healthier ecosystem, as also serves for tourism. For example, I think a great and important step. The other one will be transition to carbon neutral society. We have increasing each year of renewable energies, and in 2020 total gross of used energy in Croatia was from renewables was 31%. Until 2030, target is 40% on EU level. On Croatian level is 36.5. But I think we will more and more work to catch really this and realize this 40%. Also pushed by this war in Ukraine. So we are really now in challenging time for energy, but this energy transition is important to transform our society to climate neutral, and there is many challenges and issues. I hope that we will live in better Croatia, in better EU for 10 years.
Thank you very much for being with us. Key messages, if you ask me, working from the bottom on the zero level, working with people, helping them, being linked with institutions and in politics in general, being focused on results, paying for results, not for just being there, pretending to do something. Do not forget biodiversity, and do not claim space is empty just because it is not something there what is interested for investors. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you very much for all of you to listening to us. Please welcome our panelists once more. end there is some small food, finger food, and some drink in front of this hall, so please do not run away.